Every manipulation technique explained and how to resist. Gaslighting. Gaslighting is a manipulation technique where someone makes you doubt your own memory, feelings, or sense of reality. It does not usually happen in one big dramatic moment. Instead, it happens slowly through small comments and repeated denial until you start questioning yourself instead of them. A gaslighter might say things like, "That never happened," even when you clearly remember it. Or they might tell you that you're too sensitive when you explain how something hurt you. The goal is not to solve a disagreement. The goal is to make your version of reality feel unreliable, so theirs becomes the default. Over time, this causes confusion. You start second guessing your memory, your emotions, and even your instincts. This makes control easier because if you don't trust yourself, you are more likely to trust the person rewriting the story. Gaslighting works best when it is calm and subtle, not loud and aggressive. That quiet confidence is what makes it effective. Gaslighting can appear in romantic relationships, families, friendships, and workplaces. The pattern is usually the same: denial, minimization, and repetition. Each moment alone feels small. Together, they slowly erode your confidence. It's like someone adjusting your mental GPS, 1 degree at a time, until you're completely lost. How to combat gaslighting? You ground yourself in facts and feelings. Writing things down helps because written records don't change their story mid sentence. You also trust how something made you feel, even if someone disagrees. Feelings are not evidence, but they are signals, and signals matter. You do not need permission to believe your own experience. The moment gaslighting loses power is when you stop trying to convince the other person and start protecting your clarity instead. Someone who pretends not to understand is not confused. They are committed to control. Guilt tripping. Guilt tripping is a manipulation technique where someone uses your sense of responsibility or kindness against you. Instead of asking directly for what they want, they make you feel bad until you give in. The request is wrapped in disappointment, sadness, or dramatic sighing, like emotional background music meant to lower your defenses. A guilt trip often sounds like, "I guess I'll just do it myself," or "after everything I've done for you." The words themselves may seem harmless, but the message underneath is clear. If you don't comply, you are a bad person. This shifts the focus away from the actual request and onto your character. The brain is very sensitive to guilt because guilt evolved to keep groups working together. It's a social glue. Manipulators exploit this by triggering guilt even when you've done nothing wrong. Suddenly, a simple choice feels like a moral failure. You're not deciding, you're apologizing while deciding. Guilt tripping works best on empathetic people. If you care about others, your brain tries to fix emotional discomfort fast. The manipulator knows this and applies pressure until you cave, then acts relieved, which teaches your brain that giving in stops the discomfort. Congratulations, your nervous system just got trained like a very polite dog. How to combat guilt tripping? Separate the request from the emotion. Ask yourself, if this were asked calmly, would I say yes? If the answer is no, the guilt is doing the work, not the logic. Respond to the request, not the emotional performance. Simple statements like, "I'm not able to do that," work well because they don't argue with feelings or accept blame. You are allowed to disappoint people. Discomfort is not damage. When guilt tripping stops working, it usually stops being used because manipulation hates boundaries almost as much as it hates calm sentences. Love bombing. Love bombing is a manipulation technique where someone overwhelms you with attention, praise, gifts, or affection very quickly. At first, it feels amazing. You feel special, chosen, and understood. It's like emotional fast food, delicious immediately, suspicious later. The key feature is speed. The connection escalates faster than logic can keep up. Big compliments appear early. Promises show up before trust exists. The manipulator creates emotional intensity so your brain bonds before it has time to ask questions like, "Why does this feel like a movie montage?" Love bombing works because the brain releases dopamine and oxytocin, chemicals linked to pleasure and bonding. Once those chemicals are active, critical thinking takes a nap. When the attention later disappears or turns controlling, your brain wants the good feeling back and may tolerate bad behavior to get it. The switch is important. After the bond forms, affection becomes conditional. Praise turns into pressure. You're rewarded when you comply and ignored when you don't. The brain connects obedience with emotional safety, which is exactly the point. How to combat love bombing? Slow everything down. Real connection can handle time. Ask yourself whether actions match words over weeks, not days. Healthy affection is steady, not explosive. If someone pushes intensity while discouraging boundaries, that's not romance, it's a sales pitch. Love bombing loses power when you refuse to rush. Manipulation hates patience almost as much as it hates receipts. Playing the victim. Playing the victim is when someone avoids responsibility by presenting themselves as constantly wronged or helpless. Every situation becomes about how unfair life has been to them. Accountability disappears into a fog of sadness and sighing. This technique works because humans are wired to help people who seem hurt. When someone frames themselves as the victim, your brain switches into rescue mode. You stop analyzing behavior and start managing emotions. Suddenly, you're apologizing for things you didn't do. The manipulator may exaggerate problems, twist events, or focus only on how they feel, not what happened. Any attempt to address an issue gets redirected to their pain. Logic never gets a turn to speak. It's like arguing with a smoke machine. Over time, this creates imbalance. You carry responsibility, guilt, and emotional labor while they avoid change. The more you help, the less they improve. The cycle repeats because it works. How to combat victim playing. Acknowledge feelings without accepting blame. You can say, I understand this is hard for you without fixing it or apologizing. Keep conversations grounded in actions and solutions, not emotional reruns. Compassion does not require self sacrifice. Helping someone grow is kind. Enabling someone to stay stuck is exhausting. The silent treatment, also known as emotional airplane mode. The silent treatment is a manipulation technique where someone refuses to communicate in order to punish, control, or pressure you. Instead of talking about a problem, they disappear emotionally. No replies, no eye contact, no explanation, just vibes. Very uncomfortable vibes. Silence works because the human brain hates unfinished business. When someone suddenly stops responding, your brain goes into investigation mode. You replay conversations, analyze tone, and mentally rewatch the last interaction like it's security footage. The silence creates anxiety, and anxiety makes people desperate for resolution. What makes the silent treatment manipulative is intent. This is not healthy space. Healthy space comes with clarity, like I need time and I'll talk later. Manipulative silence comes with confusion. You are left guessing how long it will last and what you did wrong, which shifts the power completely to the silent person. Over time, this trains the brain to avoid conflict. You learn that speaking up leads to emotional abandonment, so you stay quiet to keep peace. The manipulator doesn't need to argue anymore. The silence does the work for them. It's like emotional Wi-Fi being shut off until you behave. The silent treatment also creates a reward system. Communication returns only after you apologize, back down, or comply. This teaches your brain that obedience restores connection. Congratulations, the silence has become a remote control. How to combat the silent treatment. You name it calmly. Something like, I'm willing to talk when we're both ready to communicate respectfully. Then you stop chasing. No essays, no panic apologies, no guessing games. Silence loses power when it stops producing emotional chaos. Communication is not a prize you earn. It is a basic requirement. Anyone who withholds it on purpose is not being quiet. They're being strategic. Fear-based manipulation. Scaring you into obedience. Fear-based manipulation controls behavior by making you afraid of consequences, whether those consequences are real, exaggerated, or completely made up. The fear does not have to be loud. Sometimes it's a warning. Sometimes it's a look. Sometimes it's just enough to make your stomach drop. This technique works because fear shuts down the thinking part of the brain. When fear is active, logic goes offline. The brain switches into survival mode, which means it wants safety right now, not fairness or long-term health. That's why fear makes people agree to things they normally wouldn't. Fear manipulation can include threats of abandonment, punishment, embarrassment, or loss. If you don't do this, I'll leave. If you say no, things will get ugly. Sometimes the threat is indirect, like reminding you of how bad things could be. The manipulator doesn't push. You jump. What makes this especially effective is repetition. Even if the threat never happens, your brain learns to anticipate danger. You start obeying before fear is even triggered. At that point, the manipulation is fully automated. No reminders needed. Fear-based manipulation is often defended as concern or protection, but real concern explains. Fear manipulation pressures. If someone needs to scare you to get compliance, they are not guiding you. They are controlling the environment around your choices. How to combat fear-based manipulation. Slow everything down. Fear demands speed. Clarity demands time. Ask yourself what would actually happen if you said no. Most threats lose strength when spoken out loud. Calmly questioning fear breaks its spell. Boundaries are fear's natural predator. The more clearly you define what you will and won't accept, the less power fear has over you. Control only works when you believe there is no choice. Fear makes good alarm systems but terrible decision makers. Moving the goalposts. Moving the goalposts is a manipulation technique where the rules change every time you meet them. You do exactly what was asked, and suddenly the requirement shifts. Nothing is ever enough, and the finish line keeps rolling away like it has wheels. At first, the request seems reasonable. Tessia, just do this one thing. You do it, then it becomes, well, you should have also done this. Once that's done, a new standard appears. The manipulator never says you failed directly, they imply you're almost there, which keeps you chasing approval. This works because the brain is wired to seek completion. You want closure, you want to finish the task and relax. But moving goalposts removes completion entirely. You stay engaged, stressed, and focused on pleasing the other person instead of questioning the game itself. Over time, this damages confidence. You start believing you are always falling short, even when you're working harder than necessary. The manipulator benefits because you stay busy proving yourself while they stay unsatisfied on purpose. How to combat moving the goalposts. Clarify expectations up front and repeat them back. If the rules change, name it calmly. This wasn't part of the original agreement. You are allowed to stop playing games with no end screen. Progress is not infinite DLC. If success is impossible, the problem isn't effort, it's the rules. Triangulation. Triangulation is when someone pulls a third person into a situation to create pressure, jealousy, or insecurity. Instead of addressing issues directly, they reference others to influence how you feel or act. This often sounds like, other people agree with me, or everyone thinks this is weird, without actually naming who those people are. Sometimes the third person is real. Sometimes it's imaginary. Either way, the goal is the same: make you feel outnumbered. Triangulation works because humans fear social rejection. Your brain is wired to avoid standing alone. When it feels like others are watching or judging, you are more likely to comply just to restore social safety, even if the situation doesn't make sense. This technique also prevents resolution. You're no longer solving a problem. You're defending yourself against a crowd that may not even exist. The manipulator stays in control by staying indirect. How to combat triangulation? Bring the conversation back to the people actually involved. Ask direct questions. Who specifically said that, Sral? Or, let's talk about this one-on-one. Manipulation hates clarity because clarity removes the imaginary audience. If someone needs backup to win a conversation, the argument probably isn't strong enough on its own. False urgency. False urgency is when someone pressures you to decide quickly so you don't have time to think. Everything suddenly becomes an emergency. You must act now, immediately, right this second. No questions, no thinking, just vibes and panic. This technique works because urgency shuts down logic. The brain treats time pressure as danger, which pushes you into quick decisions. Manipulators use this to bypass your ability to evaluate options, consequences, or fairness. Common examples include deadlines that don't exist, emotional ultimatums, or statements like, if you don't decide now, the opportunity is gone. The rush feels real even when the situation isn't. False urgency also creates regret. Once the pressure is gone, you realize you agreed to something you didn't want. By then, the manipulator has what they needed. How to combat false urgency? Pause on purpose. If something is truly important, it can wait long enough for a clear decision. Say, I need time to think. Real opportunities survive reflection. Manipulative ones evaporate when delayed. Pressure is not proof of importance, it's often proof of control. Minimization. Minimization happens when someone downplays your feelings, concerns, or experiences to avoid responsibility. They don't deny what happened. They shrink it until it seems unworthy of discussion. This often sounds like you're overreacting or it's not a big deal. The message is that your reaction is the problem, not the behavior that caused it. This shifts blame without addressing the issue. Minimization works because people want to be reasonable. You don't want to feel dramatic, so you silence yourself to maintain peace, even when something genuinely matters. Over time, this teaches you to ignore your own signals. Your discomfort becomes invisible, not because it isn't real, but because it's inconvenient. How to combat minimization? Stick to facts and impact. You don't need to argue about size. This affected me is enough. Feelings don't need permission to exist. If something matters to you, it matters. If someone constantly shrinks your concerns, they are not calming the situation. They are avoiding it. Manipulation works best when you don't recognize it. But once you can spot these patterns, they lose most of their power. Understanding how these techniques work gives you back control over your choices, boundaries, and time. If this breakdown helped you protect your mind a little better, Subscribe for more clear, no nonsense explanations like this.